You're listening to the I Love You Keep Going podcast with George Haas. For more information, please visit our website at www.mettagroup.org. That's www.mettagroup.org.
If you're interested in diving into your own attachment repair journey and earning security, I invite you to sign up for my free video training called What is Secure Attachment and Do I Have It? You'll learn what attachment theory entails, the defining traits of different attachment strategies, and how to see the warning signs of attachment disturbance across different areas of your life and behavior. Not only that, but you'll glimpse the impact this attachment injury may be having on your relationships, career, and meaningful pursuits. This framework is a helpful starting place, giving you the keys to understanding the root problem and an introduction to the reparative path forward that we offer here at Mettagroup. Head to mettagroup.org/start-here or click the link below to get started. So welcome, everybody. This is I Love You Keep Going. It is Thursday, January 29th. It's 2026. It's 7:35 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And I again feel the necessity to talk about what's happening in Minnesota. I think mainly what I want to say about that is that we've turned a corner and are at the point now where we are going to have to actively resist the things that are happening. There's no real way around that. And so what I would ask people to do is to pay attention to the opportunities to actively resist that arise in your communities and that you participate actively in them. It is, I think, clear that the resistance that the people in Minneapolis have put up is having an effect, and that overall we need to greet this with that level of engagement, even though it is terrifying what can happen. So that's what I want to say about that. I know that this isn't typically a space where we engage in this kind of dialogue, but I don't think that there isn't a choice now to engage in this. That has been taken, and that we have to, or we'll end up in a position of being complicit with what's happening. And then it is also January 29th, which is usually the time that I reflect myself and ask everyone else to reflect on how well you're doing with your New Year's resolutions. I flippantly say every year that the only one that I've really been able to keep reliably is the one where I don't make any more. On the other hand, I do think that it's useful to make commitments around practice, which is the conversation that we do intend to have here. What is it that you want to practice? What is it that you're looking for in practice? We are a culture that's very goal directed, and so we tend to establish these goals and then doggedly pursue them in some sense. And one of the things about exploration is that we want to be open to the results of the exploration and not discard the results that contradicts what our plan is. Actually, what we want to do is be engaged in the outcome of the exploration, see what's actually happening, and adjust accordingly so that in some sense you in keeping with this idea of Buddhist engagement, is you form a sense of reality which comes with an intention and action for an action that you would take in response to the way that you perceive things. And then you take in the outcome of the action that you take. And then you reassess what's happening, redirect, and in the next moment make an intention and action that's based on what's happened. This would be a kind of active mentalizing in that frame of understanding the reality that you made, understanding what you want to communicate about that reality, or understanding the action that you want to take in response to that, forming the intention for the action, making the action, and then gathering the outcome of that. One of the things that's the most interesting about making the intention for engaging in a longer term exploration is what comes up that prevents you from doing that. That's actually one of the great windows into conditioning, to see that there is the intention, often centered in the self experience, that then drives you to respond in a particular way. And then do you collect the responses of that and to begin to understand why it is that you can do some things and why it is that you can't do other things, different than your capacities to do it, but just is the internal framework that allows you to pursue certain things and gets in the way of pursuing certain things that prevents that. We use ideal parent figure often to begin to remap that conditioning. And we have these experiences or these beliefs that accompany that conditioning about what is possible for us and what is not possible for us. In that process of forming conceptual reality from our direct sensing experience, so the capacity to sense meets the object can be sense. Consciousness of the sensing experience arises. The body really processes it for urgency. Does it need immediate attention? Does it not matter if we ever get to it? Is there time for a pleasant experience? And then that forms a queue of these mind moments that are then compared to the perceptual database. And if there's an entry in the perceptual database that's close enough to our sensing experience, that whole thread of meaning attaches to it, and then it rolls into conceptual reality. It rolls into the thing that we think is happening. But what also is happening in that moment is the opening of all of the choices that we could make in response to the conditions of the present moment. And what very often happens is that our conditioning prevents us from being able to see the opportunities that are available to us. And so we end up in a process of habitually choosing over and over again the things that we think are possible and not responding or choosing the things, not responding to or choosing the things that we might choose had we considered the possibility of choosing them. Now, this all goes by really fast. And so most of the time, these choices are unconscious and unknown to the self experience. It's just this habit of choosing. So the question then is, how do you bypass the limited beliefs of the self and to allow yourself the unconscious, we would say in the West, the unconscious freedom to choose something that would be of interest to you, that is maybe a stretch in terms of what you usually choose or what your conditioning is like. One of the things about working with ideal parent figure protocol is it bypasses the identified self and works on restructuring the database so that that automatic process of choosing happens, and we begin to choose from a much wider range of possibilities than we would um, if we ended up choosing everything through that self-conscious experience of being. Do you have a sense of what your limited beliefs are? Do you know the exercise of how to examine the identity of the believer, of the limited belief? Usually, when you notice that there's a limited belief arising in the mind, that this idea is that you could or could not do something. Usually, the limited beliefs are in the latter. You can't do this. You don't deserve it, or you can't have it, or you're not capable of it. You then turn and examine where that belief is centered in the body. So the limited identity forms a limited belief, and then you search for the location of the limited identity. And what you find as you do that thorough search is that you can't locate it. This is true in most of the different lineages of Buddhist thought. That the self experience arises dependent of the conditions of the present moment, and the that memory thread that attaches, that creates the sense of reality, comes with that conditioned belief of what's possible and what isn't possible. And this is a collection of things that happen over the course of a lifetime. But really, the early capacities are formed in that dyadic experience with the caregiver and the early interactions with them. It's kind of a drag, really, I think. We have the moment that we have the least agency, the least capacity to reflect these lifelong structures are formed. And it really isn't until you're in your mid-20s that you even have the cognitive capacity to begin to examine them. Even if they're really egregious in early life, what you notice is you keep running your life off the rails, but you don't really have much sense in why you're doing that. And as you reflect on the way that other people seem to be able to navigate the world, and recognize that actually you can't do that. That sort of reinforces over and over again these beliefs about your capacity, right, or what the world has to offer you. I was having a conversation with a student, and the lament was, "Why is God doing this to me?" Um, in a sense of trying to make sense to these limitations that arise over and over again. Um, she did follow it up with a statement. Considering what's happened to you, I completely understand why you're an atheist. Which is an interesting thing. Do you have a sense of the divine? Do you have a sense of God? Do you uh, find that you don't have that sense? I wonder how that has to, what that has to do with conditioning, or is it simply an orientation to the world? I have a sense of cause and effect, um, but I also have a sense of the vastness of things and the level of complications of things. And I know that we, and as part of the human condition, love a good narrative to explain why something is happening. I just don't find easily an understanding of why that particular narrative is better than some other narrative that you might apply to the same situation. Um, the uh, the notion that Your smartphone could calculate the trajectory of something that happened and explain it. You could type into ChatGPT, why did this happen? And it would give you a reasonable explanation for that. But could you say what's going to happen next and have it predict with any reliability what was going to happen next? I don't think so. So we live in that conundrum of trying to make sense of what happens with no capacity to reliably predict what's happening. We have parameters, and we talk about secure functioning and secure attachment, and that the foundation of that is reliability. That you show up, that you're predictable in the way that you show up. That if you say that you're going to show up, you most of the time show up. So we do have the capacity to um, in some sense, predict whether somebody's reliable or not. And if they demonstrate that reliability often enough, we don't worry about it particularly. Um, but it is an interesting dilemma to be human in a world where everything is so changeable and unpredictable. And then to have to create some kind of experience of safety so that we can settle in and pick a path and walk along it. Is that making sense? The my intention for my practice this year is to show up to these various sitting groups that I belong to and sit the meditation periods. And during the month of December, when I was making this plan, I was given my schedule the way that it was easily able to make multiple sessions per week. And when January returned, what you may notice about January is everybody makes these commitments to themselves to engage in things, and it's perhaps the busiest month of the year as the result of everybody showing up. And then it cools down in February, and by March, it's back to normal. So I've been so busy, I haven't been able to go to these groups that I was planning to go to. Um, what is it that you use in the mind to let yourself off the hook for these things that you intend to do for yourself? I was sitting this morning, and for some reason, the thought was that I should learn to speak Spanish. Now, I have tried to learn to speak Spanish. I have virtually no capacity for language. Uh, and I have had at various times in my life pretty good restaurant Spanish, and at one point, even gas station Spanish. But I was walking the dog yesterday. The reason this comes up is I was walking the dog, and somebody came up to me and asked me something that seemed quite urgent in Spanish, and I couldn't figure out what it is that they needed. And so it was of no help. Uh, and they had uh, a facility in English that matched my facility in Spanish. So we were unable to communicate. Luckily, there was somebody sitting in the car that they could get their answer to, and off they went. It seems like a good utility in this country to speak Spanish. I can add that to my list of things. Christian?
George, the best way to learn Spanish is through watching telenovelas if you're so amenable.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's nothing ever happens. It's like an episode every day. The acting is so actually maybe the acting has gotten better. So
Oh,
It
What are
helps.
you talking about? Melodrama. I love melodrama.
The melodrama helps because you can always tell what's going on even if you can't understand any of the words.
All right. I don't have a television. Uh, but maybe it's streamable somewhere. You see? With no capacity to predict that in any way, but still able to cram it into the narrative somehow of life. One of the things that comes up in my practice is that a sense of sacredness overtakes me, and it's quite destabilizing, I find, and not particularly enjoyable and not predictable. And so I was uh, talking about it um, uh, with Dustin DePerna, and uh, his response is that he thought Dan Brown would say, "Oops, I'm overwhelmed," that would be it, and that you don't get caught up in the special states, particularly. You just let them come and go like all things. And so that's the practice. Um, when you get to the point of your practice where there's no discernment between formal practice on the cushion and the practice of life, then it's all just practice in that sense. How have you organized your uh, the intention for practice this year? And are you still doing it now that we're at the end of the impetus to do it? And we have to then uh, find some, shall we use discipline as the word to describe what we need to do? I am not a particularly disciplined person, and I tend to do better with enjoyment. So I attempt to organize it in such a way that I enjoy doing it so that I look forward to doing it rather than burdening it with a schedule or something like that, some duty to do it. But what works for you, since you're not me, and we are in this conundrum of the human life of being all so very much like each other and at the same time completely unique from each other. That each of these moments that we create a sense of reality, we create it based on our conditioning, and because each of our conditionings is different, the way that we create reality is different. I think one of the reasons that we like to do things together is because it creates a greater perspective on what it is that's actually happening. We go to a concert together or a film together or something, an event, and we each have the experience, which is totally our own experience. And then in the expression of what that experience was to someone else, and we hear their experience, which is different than ours, it creates a contrast and an expansion of our capacity to sense and experience something. It creates the opportunity of a deeper understanding that we wouldn't really be able to discover on our own. One of the things about the human condition is also that our capacities for self reflection are, let's just say, uh, easily delusional. We can get caught up and lost in our own thought process and have a hard time seeing around the corner to what's actually happening. So maybe the time is to recommit to another month of a practice. I went to see a singer a Pakistani singer. Her name is Aruf. I wonder what her last name is. Maybe I can look it up quickly. I had not seen her before. But she said it's a roof, a tab, aftab, Aftab. Terrible with pronunciation. Arouge, aftab. Um, she said that she was terribly hungover and that she had put dry January on pause temporarily. She was considering returning to it, but I really think that whole idea of January and the start over is um, pretty amazing if you get it all the way to the end of the month before you collapse into the habit, the wearing down. Where do you want to go? What do you want to do? And how do you move in that direction, particularly when the world does not respond, the world seems to be resisting of it. Dan Brown used to say that if you lead an ethical life, the things that happen to you are the good karma. And that the idea is to attempt to understand it in that way. Um, but a lot of the times you don't like it. So then what do? It's the good karma and you don't like it because we have this idea that the good karma is the thing that we like and want, and the bad karma is the thing that we don't want, don't like. It's that investigation from that place so that it doesn't undermine and you don't collapse into this kind of self-pitying that the world isn't going your way. In fact, your attention is to living an ethical life and doing your very best in everything that you do without exception to that. And then seeing what happens and understanding that what happens is the result of these commitments to an ethical life and to doing your very best. And then seeing that as an indication of what your conditioning is, what direction you need to go to. And in each of those moments, what is opening up is the choice for the next moment. And can you see that clearly? The choices then that you can take and move in the next direction that's presented over and over, each moment. I like to say the eternity of the present moment, which is very fleeting. It's always the present moment. It's never not the present moment. But it doesn't last very long. Over and over again. Can you adjust to that? Make sense of that? Each time you make a choice about something, all of the choices that you might have taken that you did not take disappear. And then what happens next are all of the possibilities that are linked to the choice that you made. And over, we engage in that. So we can end up in these virtual cycles where most of the choices that we could make are pretty good. And we could end up in these vicious cycles where most of the choices that we have next are not so good. And that over time, the direction changes quite a bit. In my, how old would I have been? I would say in my late 20s, when I was first beginning to examine the state of my life and what my capacities to respond were. to what might come, and to reflect back on what had happened to put me in the position that I was in, it seemed to me that there was an overwhelming amount of change that I needed to engage in order to make life different, make it bearable. And I was uh, in a kind of formal psychoanalysis at the time. And my analyst said, in response to my declaration, that it was an impossible amount of change that was required, that really all I had to do was change the direction I was headed by the width of a hair, and that over time, the width of that hair would lead you to an entirely different place than if you didn't. I remember in New York in the 70s, we went to an anti-nuclear war demonstration, which at the time was the largest demonstration that had happened across the country. And there was a woman holding a placard that had the Zen saying on it, if you don't change the direction you're headed in, you're liable to end up where you're going, which I thought was beautiful. So when we consider all of this, this action of engaging moment by moment in the present moment, the conditions that unfold, and how we're going to engage it, these tiny experiences of the present moment, it's actually the whole terrain of what we need to do, and to pay attention to that moment when what opens in front of us are all of the possibilities that we could choose for the next present moment, which is coming relentlessly without our ability to refuse, really. I'm not making predictions about what happens after you die. Um, I don't have much of a sense of that. But it may be that the relentlessness of the present moment is even unfazed by that. Uh, we just are in a different form. What do you think? Is there reincarnation? To imagine that happening? Uh, how are you with confusion? And how are you with not having to know? Some people like certainty. I don't have much experience of certainty. And so I tend to be uh, better at practicing equanimity with not knowing rather than having a particular framework for it. And I don't know that I get much comfort out of the frameworks. They seem bulky and hard to hold, mainly.
Sorry, George, which frameworks?
Well, I spent most of my practice in the Theravada world and learned the narratives of the Theravada world. And then when I was studying with Dan, I entered into the Bon world. And so I have been, um, reading and the stuff I like to do, read, and learn, and understand the conceptual frameworks. Um, But what's often absent for me is a strong feeling about them. I get them. Well, the Theravada path is quite a bit simpler, or at least it was much simpler for me to understand than the elaborateness of the Bon tradition, which has been much harder. It may also be that I'm 35 years older and everything is slower. um, I tend to be more experiential in terms of understanding of things. I like to have experiences and make sense of the experiences. And then later, if I can uh, understand how they relate to the narratives around what it is, then I can uh, take some interest in that. But often I have trouble with that part. I was talking to someone about um, their parents dying, and was feeling quite strongly that sense that really what seems to matter to people at the end of life is that the people that they loved knew that they loved them. That seems to be one of the long conversations. Not that they did everything right, not that they provided the best care, but just that the people that they loved knew that they loved them. And that actually resonates pretty well with me. How do you let people in on the fact that you delight in them, that you care about them, that you're interested in them doing well in the things that matter to them, and that you offered and offer and will offer support to them in doing that, in them leading an authentic exploration for themselves, what matters. How do you make sense of it is the question, really, since you're not me and I'm not recommending anything to you other than the inquiry of what matters to you and what you want to do. And then how do you get the support that you need in order to do it? In the model for secure relating, of course, you build these social networks around yourself uh, of people who can emotionally regulate you easily so that you can fall back on them when you're dysregulated and can't regulate yourself. And that once you're regulated again, of course, they push you back out into your exploration so that you can really go hard into the exploration because you don't worry so much about what happens if you get completely knocked sideways because you know that you can come rushing back to the group of people that catch you and are curious about what it is that you're finding out and are willing to share with you what they're finding out. And that synergy, it's almost magical that arises between people exploring things that relate enough that what one person finds out is useful to another person in their exploration, and what that person finds out then in the expression is useful to the other person, and that the interaction creates these perspectives or these views that you can take in that you wouldn't be able to find on your own. That's really the thing that makes the exchange so marvelous. And how do you do that? Of course, you have to be willing to tell people authentically what is your experience and also what it is that matters to you and what it is that you're finding out, and then noticing whether that energy of exchange happens. But insecure and disorganized people don't necessarily do that. What they want to do is hunker down with somebody and find a reason why they don't have to do the exploration. Of course, it doesn't produce the richness of meaning toward the end of life if you haven't been able to explore enough there's a kind of despair, but even worse is a bitterness about uh, uh, not having done enough. Of course, we have all of these limits that are part of the culture that we're in, and how resources are distributed, and what possibilities that are offered to you, depending on how you fit into all of this. But if we uh, pull out of that, uh, I guess they call it a ladder, climbing the ladder of the values of our culture, and instead focus on what matters. There's an alternative path to, for those of us that don't really have I like to call it whiteness, right? That you need in order to do that. Is that making sense? You're understanding my thinking on this? Can you organize yourself in such a way that you can effectively explore the things that really matter to you, and not get bogged down in the collection of societal tokens, I like to call them? Maybe the impetus for that for me is because I did spend a lot of my time trying to do that, trying to be somebody of value, but it wasn't so productive. Paul?
Thanks, George. I'm actually wondering if you would riff a bit on discerning like how much secondary exploration is enough. Because I think I'm, new enough to primary exploration that I sometimes am like, how do I know I'm doing too much to get effort to get necessary resources and time and so on versus like, is this really, do I need to do this particular thing to carve out time to make money to et cetera, keep the house going? And my experience with that is it's not totally clear a lot of the time. Like how much of it, put it differently, how much of whatever I'm doing, paying the bills, organizing something, working is actually like a habit versus a defense against actually engaging in primary exploration versus necessary. Like, oh, I really need this amount. I wonder if you could you riff a bit on maybe some way that if it's new and confusing, we might gain some more clarity for ourselves on that.
So in understanding what the primary exploration is, what also may come with that is how much time each day do you need to do it? And what is your capacity to do it per day? So if it were me, I would be thinking that I can be actively engaged in the creation of primary exploration about 2 hours a day, maybe on a good day, 3 hours of the day. So what I really need to do is be able to have that period of time. I also like to do reading. Reading doesn't take as much energy for me as say, writing or creating something else. And so I might be able to do that in addition to the other. And so let's say 2 hours of that. I like to read 2 hours a day. So then we're talking about 4 or 5 hours a day that I need to generate from secondary exploration of free time to be able to do that. Then what else do I need to do? I need to eat, and I need to walk the dog, and I need to hang out with people. 2 hours a day for hanging out with people, I think, is a good amount. But not having anything to do in the 2 hours, just hanging out, right? That unrestricted time with close people is important. And so then what we're looking at is the remaining hours that then can be allocated toward secondary exploration. It's kind of how I think about it. How much money do you need to make, and what kind of engagement do you have to be in? So on the flip side of that, of course, is if somebody's going to engage you to do work, what is it that they require? And part of that is going to then gauge the amount of remuneration that you can get for the activity that you engage in. The other dilemma, of course, for us is we're in this process where technology is, if the hype is even remotely true, which is also hard to know, we're moving into a post-labor, post-capitalist economic system, which is going to be quite different than what's happening now. So over the next 30 years, say. Different dilemma depending on how old you are, of course. Do you have to work for the next, do you have to engage in secondary exploration for the next 30 years? Navigate all of this stuff, or do you not? How will that be? It may be, if there's some, if the forces of justice prevail, that it will be easier and easier to collect the secondary resources that you need. If you only have to work 3 days a week and it's remunerative in the same way that 5 or 6 days a week is now, then that will create a much greater potential for primary exploration, I think. On the other hand, if it flips the other way and you're in destitution and the whole time needs to be dedicated just to the basics, that will be curtailing of primary exploration quite a bit. So then what you're doing is examining how much capacity that you have and how much attention in terms of the time needs to be given and to actually arrive at the place of meaning that you're looking for. And then organizing it so that each day is like that. Each day has that space to do it. I don't know. I do a lot of writing recently. And in order to be able to write easily, you have to be in the space of the writing. And that means you have to do it pretty much every day, because if you don't, you come out of the space and then all of the energy is spent just getting back into the space so that you can then do the writing. And that happens quite a bit with most primary explorations. If you're not in the space of the exploration, then the energy that you would have to engage in primary exploration is spent getting into the space to do it. And then there's not so much left to do the actual exploration. So you have to be quite protective of the space for the primary exploration so that the energy is spent engaged in the exploration and not just getting into the space that you can do it. Christian.
George, do you find that you've developed a kind of exploratory view or mind state that you can kind of call up and get you into that zone?
Um,
I guess I think by analog, like if I haven't really been practicing this lately, but if I'm trying to perform on violin, there's very much a kind of performance mind state or view that helps to get into. And I kind of wonder if you've developed something akin to that.
I come out of self-consciousness. I'm not so in self-consciousness most of the time at this point in my practice, but and I just engage in the activity without much sense of a self doing anything. So the self is definitely in the witness space, and I'm engaged in the doing of it. But the doing of it is largely unknowable to the self experience. The self is just watching what's happening, and it's just flowing and happening. I would guess that that's close to what playing the violin is like.
I think so. There's little bits of conscious effort, I guess, like I need to do this, in this part coming up, but in between those moments, it's you really want as kind of free of a flow as possible. So just these
Yeah.
tiny little adjustments along the way.
I think of it as a beingness without a particular view. So I would say an equanimous state rather than holding a view.
Okay.
Did you want to practice today? What do you think? What shall we do?
Vipassana?
Okay. We'll do a little concentration practice and then some Vipassana. So go ahead and settle into your meditation posture. Okay. Let go of the meditation. Comments or questions? Good practice. So on February 20th, we're starting a new level 2 on Friday mornings. Take a look at that. On February 14th, we're starting meditation and addiction level 1, which will run for 3 Saturdays, 14, 21, 28. Not sure what else is coming up. Have a look. Kaleidoscope, of course, is coming. We'll have our February kaleidoscope. Well, that's all I can tell you because the rest of it is not on my calendar. So if you're interested in that, take a look. It will be an Open Door Dharma, which is the live event that I do once a month, which is on the 15th of February, so Sunday the 15th. So I offer the teachings freely, but I do hope that if you can make a donation, you consider it. There's a link on the website for donations. It helps support me and also the work that Mettagroup is doing. But also, please feel free to come and practice with us. We really enjoy that too. Thanks. See you soon. Bye. If you're struggling with addiction or have in the past, I invite you to check out my free video on how to heal from addiction. You'll learn about the distinct attachment repair approach to addiction recovery that we offer here at Mettagroup, and how this approach differs from other forms of addiction support like 12-step programs, rehab, or even therapy. If you're finding that persistent anger, frustration, resentment, and shame consume your life, or you're stuck in dysfunctional cycles that keep your life small, then check out this resource. If you struggle with substance abuse or process addiction, this is for you. Sign up for free at mettagroup.org/addiction or head to the link below.